Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week and for this year. While we have been releasing some episodes this year, this is our first episode we're actually recording in 2026. So Happy New Year to everybody, even though I think this is going to be releasing mid-February. The Magical Learning Podcast is a podcast that looks at business and life and interesting topics, and we like to analyze them in a fun and interesting way. Magical Learning has been operating for over 25 years and has worked with some global thought leaders like John Mattone and Robin Sharma. We're excited to get into today's conversation, and as people would have seen from the title of this, we have a guest, and actually, to be honest, a friend of the show. We'll get to them very shortly, but first we've got to check in and see how everyone's week's been. So I might start with you, Graham. Graham, how's your week been? And I guess year thus far?
Cheers. Hi. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, viewers, listeners, and assorted life forms, wherever you happen to be. Well, 2026, a new year, and I have not changed. I still waffle on. I would like to claim still being in post-Cook Islands. What's the opposite of a hangover, like a really good hangover? Is it a hang-under? Not sure. I'll have to check that out. Anyway, despite the fact that it's been, I think, 10 days since we actually came back, but, you know, it's early. Other than that, I'm good, Jez. Happy to be here again.
Well, very excited to have you on for 2026, Graham, and very excited to hear maybe a bit more about the Cook Islands. Sounds very nice. All right, let's go to Danette. Danette, how have you been? How's the start of 2026, and how's your week going?
Yeah, so Cook Islands was magnificent. We might share a couple of photos with our audience because stunning, definitely a place to go if you want beautiful crystal clear water and white sandy beaches and nothing scary eating you.
There goes the suspense.
Sorry. And then this week I'm down at Mum and Dad's and I've been doing aqua aerobics. So that's been hilarious. I've been laughing my head off. So nice start to the year getting fit again. And yeah, really excited to kick off this and can't wait for this topic today. So thanks, Jez. How's your new year been? Because no one ever asked you, so I'm going to ask you.
No, my new year's been very good. I have just been doing a lot more work on sort of podcast production and stuff like that. And I also, speaking of workouts, I've come up with a fun workout for people who like cricket and want to get more abs. I've called it Slips Cordon, and what it is you get a tennis ball and you throw it against a fence. The worse the fence, the better. Ideally a wooden fence, and you just try and catch the ball, but you're lying sort of like an upside down turtle, like you're lying on your back. And it's a lot of moving around like this to catch the ball. And it's actually a great ab workout. So for people that want to do some fitness goals and you like want to improve your hand-eye coordination, Slips Cordon is my new workout.
Cheers, sorry to interrupt. Is it permissible to engage a helper to fetch the tennis ball when you fail to catch it, as I almost certainly would a lot of the time, rather than having to get up and then walk over and pick it up and then come back and lie down again? And can you have a partner in this, a slips partner?
I don't think so, because I think when it's bad, then when you get up and go do it, you go, I don't want to do this again. So it increases the want to catch the ball the next time, you know? Okay. That's my experience with the workout.
At the risk of upsetting all of our UK listeners / viewers, maybe you could sell that concept to the England cricket team.
Look, I don't think we're going to get sponsored by them anytime soon, so it's okay. That's good fighting words, Graham. But let's go to Cherie. Cherie Mylordis, friend of the podcast, and if you love this episode and you want some more Cherie, you can check out Cherie on the Adapt podcast, which would have come out a few weeks ago. But Cherie, how's your week and beginning of 2026 going?
Well, yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm in Sydney. I stayed in Sydney for the summer, which is unusual for me. I often go to the beach with my family. So I've been enjoying Sydney beaches, navigating an incredible heat wave in the early 40s. Then we've had incredible torrential rain. So working around that, also trying to get back into exercise as well. And my hot tip is habit stacking. So channeling James Clear's Atomic Habits. So what I do now is I line up all my favorite podcast episodes, of course, including this one, and I play it at the gym. And so it's wonderful because I achieve that, that learning and that listening, and then I get my workout done and I feel really satisfied at the end of that session.
Look at that. People are already taking away tips just from before we've even gotten to your intro, Cherie. This is a great start. No, that's a great way to look at it. And if you are working out and listening to the Magical Learning podcast, please let us know. We'd love to know what your workout is around that. So no, I love that, Cherie. But if people don't know who Cherie is, let me do a little introduction here before we get into today's conversation properly. So Cherie Mylordis is an executive advisor, coach, and speaker who helps organizations and their people thrive through purpose-driven leadership and change. From helping deliver the Sydney 2000 Olympics to founding her own consultancy and building a leadership academy, Cherie has spent her career showing how purpose, courage, and collaboration lead to extraordinary outcomes. As a LinkedIn top voice on leadership and the future of work, Cherie shares fresh perspectives and practical actions for a world of work that's being rewritten in real time. And look, Cherie, we've had you on to talk about many things. It's our absolute delight to have you on again. I think your episodes have done really well in the past because we've been talking about some really important topics in an ever-changing world. So thank you for being on the Magical Learning podcast today.
Oh, thank you for having me, and hello to your listeners. I am sure we're going to have a really engaging conversation today. It's a great topic, and it's important timing at the start of the year to talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So today, the topic, as people will have seen, is declining global engagement, especially at the manager level, and what to do about it. So, Cherie, I think this is a big topic that I'm hearing a lot of buzz about on different social media platforms, different sort of newsletters and articles. So before we get into the questions today, did you just want to talk a little bit about what your interest in this topic is and a little bit about why you chose it?
I'm fascinated about workplace performance and experiences, and I follow extraordinary organizations around the world that really do show up quite differently in terms of their leadership, bringing more autonomy and really engaging their people in ways that many organizations would find incredibly radical and impossible almost. And so seeing these declining engagement levels, especially at the manager level, it's a really important piece because it's not something that a Christmas break is going to fix. In Australia, we go on that summer break, and I don't think organisations can rely on that recharge over the break to actually sort that out, and everyone's going to come back refreshed and re-energised. So that's why I'm passionate about this, and I think there's some really important levers that organizations can use to actually fix this. It doesn't have to be that hard, and that's why I'm really keen to talk about it and share those insights.
Well, Cherie, we're excited to get into it. And look, I think the best place to start is always Danette's questions. Danette tees us up really nicely. So, Danette, what was your questions, and tell us a little bit about why you chose them?
So, Cherie, what I've noticed with a lot of people is they'll use a word and they often define it different to other people. So I figured we'd start, given engagement is a word that some people might define quite differently.
Yes.
I'd love to understand your definition of engagement.
Absolutely. I think broadly, if we talk about workforce engagement in the context of work, it really is about how committed, enthusiastic, and dedicated people are towards their work and also towards the organisation they belong to. So really, I guess in simple terms, it's about whether people feel connected to their work and whether they feel motivated to do their best work is how I would describe it.
So I love that answer. And so following on, as you said, we in Australia, we obviously coming out of the holiday season and stuff. And as you said, a lot of workplaces are like, oh, well, people have had leave, so they should be good now. But actually, I'd love to hear, you talked about the levers around engagement. Why is this so important for organisations, particularly as we go into what I suspect is going to be a reasonably turbulent year?
I think so. I think January is setting the tone for a wild year. And as Jez said in the intro about me, work is being rewritten in real time. And I think the world, the whole state of the world is being rewritten in real time. Those institutions that we took for granted is all up in the air right now. Everything's up for grabs. So in terms of why this is important, we've got a lot of pressure on organizations right now. We've got the global uncertainty. We've got economic uncertainty and pressure. We've also got technology disruption. So we've got AI coming in. Everyone's talking about AI and everyone's under pressure to bring in AI. But that doesn't abdicate our responsibility to own the work. And so there's a really important piece here about oversight and ownership. And we've all heard stories about, consulting firms sending reports out with incorrect AI hallucinations and all these things. So, we have to still be responsible and accountable for the work. And yes, there's always technology coming in that can help us do the work better and smarter. But we still need to have a sense of connection to why are we doing this work and what is the purpose of it, right? And so the three levers that I think are super important are purpose, because if you understand why your organization exists, what they're trying to do beyond the P&L, that really helps to connect people. It's also about leadership. How do leaders show up? Is it authentic? Is it consistent? And is it in a way that will bring out the best in people in this modern world of work that is rapidly changing? And then the third piece is change, because no organization can actually just stay, we're good now, we can stay how we are, we've got this. No, the change is more rapid than ever before. And so how you articulate change and how you lead people through change is absolutely critical. And so those three things I think are very important in terms of the impact on engagement and how we can create that shift, because I have a little mantra that I've been using, which is January does not fix what December ignored. You like that?
I love that. That's awesome. And, it is such a great reminder to the leaders. Because I also know some people who've gone, I'm just going to work through. And they're going to come back as leaders who are not necessarily prepared for all of the disruption, let alone the leadership, etc., the change that they're going to be dealing with. So I love your three levers, and really looking forward to the rest of this conversation. Thanks, Cherie.
Awesome. Thanks, Danette. Yeah, great questions. And what an interesting place to start. Well, I think that's going to feed us nicely into Graham's question. So, Graham, what's your question? Tell us a little bit about why you chose it.
A lot of the time we were talking about things like employee engagement at every level. We tend to look at things like the Gallup annual sort of survey as a source of some validity. And I noticed that if you look at the stats around employee engagement, and this is just across the board, engagement's higher in what it was in 2025, the last time that the last survey was done, than it was a decade ago. I was surprised because I hadn't bothered looking at the trend before. So, yeah, this is a comment. Like, we could spend a week, I think, going down this particular rabbit hole, but I'm worried that I might not be able to find a way back. So, in the context of everything that's going on at the moment, we are less than a month into 2026. If you pay attention to international news, you are probably going to be more concerned than you were on Christmas Day. Not that I recommend that people pay attention to it, because I don't think we can help. But again, in the context of just ongoing chaos, disruption, uncertainty, and we're no longer, to your point, we can't just sort of close the door, turn the lights off, and pretend that our part of the world isn't changing. It's a fun sort of fantasy to engage in sometimes, but the broom closet's really small, and when you come out, things have still changed. You can edit that out, Jez. So everything around us is changing and will continue to change. I note that part of the topic today was talking about the fact that people at a managerial level, the level of engagement for managers has fallen. I think the level of engagement for people identifying as women in the workplace has also fallen. And it's sort of not surprising. It's not great. I'm not saying, well, it's a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing at all. But part of me just wonders whether, do we just sort of need to back off a little bit? And this is probably far too philosophical a question to cover in half an hour. but are we? I'm trying to understand what are the big drivers behind this constant push? Because talking about engagement levels, we've been doing this for a decade. This is not new. And yeah, some of the things you talked about, the three levers, things like purpose and leadership and change, also not new, as you'd be well aware. So part of me just wants to say, hang on, what if we just sort of took a step back and hit the pause button? Let's just acknowledge the fact that engagement is higher than it was a decade ago, and given everything that's happened in the last decade, that's pretty amazing. We should be okay with that. We won't. I absolutely know that for certain we won't. But part of me just wants to think maybe we should be.
Okay, gosh, we could spend the entire podcast talking about this. No, this is great. I actually love this question because we need to look at how we are performing relative to what has been happening in the past. And that is not a question that I often get. So I was actually thrilled to hear this. So, okay, around a decade ago, 2015-ish, I remember vividly what was going on in Australia. If we look at the engagement scores, yes, we are a few percentage points up. Keep in mind, though, that the latest Gallup report was published in April 2025, and it's based on 2024 data. And everyone I spoke to in the last quarter of 2025 went, it's way worse. They could see real burnt out managers. They could see a lot of signs that said, we're on a downward slide from this. So that's a little bit of a note to make on this. But if you look at the engagement scores, yes, we're a few percentage points higher, but global engagement is still only 21%. And in Australia, it's 23%. So 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people are engaged. The rest of them are not. In Australia, 77% of workers are disengaged, and 12% of those are actively disengaged. When you compare that to what good looks like, according to Gallup, best practice is 70% or more. Now, I've worked with organisations where they're in the 80s, they're in the early to mid 80s, and they're still trying to improve. Now, for organisations, it's all about improving against yourself, really, okay? Because if you want to attract and retain talent, what you're looking for and what you're reporting against is how were we in the last couple of years and how are we now? Is our trajectory going up? Is it staying the same or is it going down? That's really what organizations care about. But we still need to look at the big picture because we need to benchmark ourselves also against what good looks like. Because if your organization's at 21% and your competitors are at 70 plus, you've got a bit of a threat there of losing people, right, to where they want to, feel more engaged. So that's a big point. But if you look at what it means, right, so if people are not engaged, they're quietly quitting. They're hanging in there, and right now everyone's doing that because there's not a lot out there. It's a tight job market. It's hard to find a new job. There's a lot of redundancies and downsizing that's happening right through to the end of last year. And so they're psychologically unattached from their work and their company, but they're hanging in there because they want the job. They're putting their head down. They're flying below the radar. They're not really putting in any discretionary effort, though. So they're just going through the motions. If people are actively disengaged, they're more what I would call loudly quitting. They're not quietly quitting. They are probably demonstrating that they're a bit unhappy at work. They're probably acting that out a bit more, and potentially that might be rippling across to their cohort as well. So that could be something that's infecting the workplace and making it more toxic. So, I think it's really important that we understand, yes, we've had some, it hasn't changed too much over the years, but when I look at 2015 in Australia, I was working with some very large corporates. I was working for a very large airline, a very large Australian airline. I wonder which one that was. And some very large financial institutions. Now, they were bringing in big agile transformations. Some of them were bringing in human-centered design, very much at that project space, but bringing in leaders in that space. Has that really changed their performance? Has that really changed their bottom line? No, it has not. Now, when you come back to, yes, purpose, leadership and change, those are constants, right? They're nothing new. But many organizations do not have a clear defining purpose. Many people think that's more of the not-for-profit space. They have a vision, they have a mission. So, what are we striving to achieve and what do we do? But why do we exist? What's the impact we're trying to make in the world really matters. And I think a really interesting statistic is that about 1 in 3 workers feel that they understand the purpose of their organisation. So maybe that's a clue in terms of that workforce disengagement. Because when people feel that sense of connection, you don't have to, monitor the swipe card access, who's in the office and who's not, to get that control back. They are actually bringing in that discretionary effort. They're more energised, they're more engaged because they care about the work. So, yeah, as I said, we could go a lot further on that, but those are some initial thoughts. How does that sound?
Thank you. Yeah, and again, I appreciate the response to what was a rambling question yet again. There is so much to unpack. If a highly effective organisation has engagement levels up around the 75 to 80%. How do we get more organisations there? But things like that you discuss, such as purpose and meaning in the workplace, it's so hard to retrofit that. As you would know, it's really, really hard firstly for organisation to do the work to try, and if they haven't already identified and articulated what their why is, to do the work to start with, to sort of work that out, and then to try and retrofit that, and then have conversations with employers who've been with them for years, who suddenly are being told, well, the reason we exist is actually different than what you thought it was, but we still want you to be excited about this. And the quiet quitting thing, I mean, quiet quitting's not a new thing. It's a new term. It's a term we've only started using in the last 5 or 6 years, but we've had people who've been quietly quitting ever since we've had organisations, I suspect. Maybe more.
Yeah.
Maybe more in the last 50 years. I don't know the numbers, but so it's there's a lot to it. I wonder whether at the end of the day, if we took people out of organisations completely and focused on trying to help them become better versions of themselves just as a human being, and then maybe put them back in the workplace, I don't know, would that help?
Okay, I have two sort of threads there that I'd love to delve into. So the first one is purpose. Can we retrofit that? I think we can. In fact, I have recently done it. Recently worked with a very large aged care organisation. The CEO, who I know, called me and said, I think I need your help. I'm not landing our why. I have a process where I take the executive team through 3 workshops, and we start with, well, what does purpose mean? What's some examples of good ones? Really get that awareness and that education up. Then we start brainstorming, but we do it from a perspective of some really big thought-provoking questions. And then we sort of get some themes out of that, and then we start to brainstorm the purpose. Then we socialize it. So I encourage them to do what I call pass the cocktail party test, which is get out there and socialize that shortlist and see if people are leaning in or screwing up their nose going, what does that mean? Now, this organisation really landed through that process on, we want our elderly people to thrive. We don't just want to keep them safe. Now, that actually changed their whole ethos of what they shared beyond, because it's like, well, if we just wanted to keep people safe, then we're going to keep people in bed, because as soon as they get out of bed, they're going to risk falling. We need to make sure that, we do that. If we want our elder people to thrive, then how do we help them thrive and live their best life within the constraints of their health, their abilities, their mobility, right? That then led to a purpose statement of helping, creating a world where older people thrive. Now, that was then launched. That went to the board endorsed it. There was interaction with the board through that process. Then it was launched. The CEO launched it with 200 leaders, and then it cascaded down. And he said, the energy, he said, we've re-energized people because I'm giving them permission to, what can you do to help the people in your care to thrive?
Yep.
Be creative, think outside the box, test and learn. And so it really gave people that autonomy. It gave people that permission. And it has really sparked this re-energization of the entire workforce. So I think you can do it. And I think you can do it very quickly, but it has to start from the top. And you can't just type it
Nice.
into your favorite AI tool and get the words right. You have to be together as a leadership team, and maybe even some other representatives of the organization, to co-design it and co-create it, because then you've got that shared ownership and that actual belief. And that's what makes a difference.
Yeah,
So that's really what I
sorry,
would say.
Cherie, I was going to say it's a great example. So thank you for sharing that.
You're
I'll stop
welcome.
hogging the conversation because I know there are some other questions. I appreciate
Sure.
that. Thank you.
No worries.
No, that was really interesting. No, it's so fascinating. There's so many different ways to look at this. So, so glad we're having you on today, Cherie. I might jump into John's question here, and John's written in: if people, or namely managers, are becoming less involved or invested across the organization globally, what impact does this have on lower level staff and culture?
In a word, it's huge. And the reason why is because the managers are that middle layer. They're between the executives, the senior leaders, and then the actual teams, the workforce, the front line, depending on the type of your organization. Now, both the research and anecdotally, what I'm seeing is that managers are under extreme pressure right now. There's tight economic conditions in organizations, so there's real pressure from the top to squeeze every little bit of, inefficiency or out of the organization so that we can, improve productivity, improve, the P&L, the bottom line. So they're under pressure to deliver and to increase productivity, but they're dealing with disengaged workforce, and they're also disengaged themselves. So they're feeling pressure, burnout. Now, what happens when people are under pressure? They revert to that sort of more control, right? They take on the control, those more primitive instincts of, I have to take control, I have to delegate, I have to tell everyone what to do, and I'm in control and I make the decisions. That's not the way to bring out the best in your people. The best in your people is when there's a clear purpose. What is the problem we're solving? What's the opportunity we're going after? What is the challenge? And then how do we work together rather than micromanaging or controlling? And where is it? Where is it? Come on, how you going? How you going? I'm hearing this because I know a lot of Gen Z people out in the workforce that are feeling this. So they're under pressure. They're also getting an increased span of control because that middle layer is being stripped out. So these waves of redundancies are stripping out the number of managers. So they're getting more people to report. And so they're finding that difficult in how do I manage a team that's bigger than me. So it comes down to instructions, get it done, pressure. And also, this is really interesting. And in the Gallup report, it shows this. Managers are typically not trained to manage. So they become really good at their thing, their area of expertise, and then they get promoted to manage other people doing that thing. But there's a very small percentage of them that are actually taught how to manage, or more importantly, how to lead. So the impact is huge. It has a ripple effect on teams who just, feel that pressure. It cascades down.
Yeah, that's so fascinating because, when you think about that concept, we've talked about it on other podcasts before as well, how people get promoted into management because they're good at a skill.
Yes.
And then that has a lot of interesting knock-on effects, not all of which are good all the time. I've certainly worked under people that were really good at a skill and then went into a management role, and it was very difficult to work under them.
Yeah.
It's actually almost was difficult to work under them because they were so good at this skill. Like, they were such a perfectionist that when they became the manager, it put the pressure on everyone else to be that intense about it. So yeah, it was interesting. That ended up not working out as well for the organization. So anyway, that was just kind of an interesting thing as you're mentioning. It's just so fascinating how these sort of things happen.
And also, just to add to that, not everyone wants to get promoted to be telling other people how to do the thing that they love, right? So some people just want a career path where they can be the guru, the expert in that thing, and not necessarily manage, the budget, the performance conversations, and telling people what to do. So having more flexible career paths and ways to deal with that, I think, are very important for organizations to consider.
Yeah, and I think that's actually also a really interesting way to think about it, is like the guru of something, or like, the expert at a business is another way to sort of make that feel as official as another management role, but then, obviously it's more on the tools. So yeah, anyway, Cherie, we're probably gonna have you back on again in the future because we've got so many questions. But let's go to Mark's question now, because there's just so many ways we can go, rabbit holes we can go down with this
I know.
conversation. Let's jump into Mark's question here though. She said, what new pressures are managers facing that didn't exist 3 to 5 years ago? So I guess the new pressures, that I guess that we're seeing in the mid 2020s.
Mm. Well, obviously AI is one of them. We didn't have that 3 to 5 years ago. That's really gained rapid traction. And so every organization is under pressure to increase productivity by bringing in these AI tools. But that brings back the question I raised earlier about responsibility, accountability, and oversight. So how are we making sure that we're using the tools within their area of value and not going beyond that? Because, LLMs, it's just, predicting what's the next word or what's the next thing based on a defined data set. And we know there's bias, and we know that, there are broader issues. So we still have to bring in what humans do best, that creative thinking, that problem solving, just those instincts. AI can't do that. So bringing that in is very important. I think there is another factor here, which is about work-life balance. Certainly, the pandemic showed that people were re-questioning what's important to me. I actually interviewed 200 leaders in 24 countries in 2 waves, in 2022 and 2023, because I was really interested to see what was coming out of the pandemic. And people were definitely saying that their thresholds have changed. So what they were willing to tolerate at work before the pandemic versus after, there's a difference there. And they actually admitted to me that they were walking away from, toxic workplaces and that command and control and even bullying and intimidation. They were potentially just accepting that that's the way it was in the past, whereas now they're not prepared to cop that. So there's a sense of agency emerging, but right now we've got that tight workforce, economic condition, and so people aren't seeing opportunities to move around so much, so they're kind of hanging on to their job because they need the money, they need to make sure they've got that financial security. And one more factor I'd bring in here is the conscious unbossing, right? So you may have heard this term. It's come out of the UK in some research in the workforce, and this is Gen Z. So the sort of early entrance to the workforce into the mid-20s. I have 3 children in that space who are in professional career roles. And what we're hearing from this generation through this research is they are rethinking that more traditional corporate ladder. They're saying that doesn't necessarily appeal to me, that, I get this job in a particular industry and I just have to climb the ladder, get into that management role that we talked about. They're looking for purpose-driven work that is meaningful. They care about the planet. They care about the world. They want flexibility. They don't want to stay in a job for 5 years. They might stay for 1.5 years, 2 years, maybe take a sideways step, go do a bit of a side hustle for a while, get into their music, do some traveling, come back in. So organizations actually need to acknowledge this, because by 2030, Gen Z is going to be 30% of the workforce. And so if you don't actually listen to what they're looking for, you might have a big hole in your workforce plan. So you need to potentially think about things like, how might we create sideways steps? How might we help people become experts in a particular area as opposed to just going for that manager role? How might we create a lovely alumni? We talk a lot about onboarding. How do we offboard people if they're going to explore another job, do some travel? How do we keep those connections going and welcome them back when they might be back in town or ready for a more stable career path? They will come back enriched no matter what they've done. They've got a different world outlook. They've tried different things, maybe outside your sector, and that is nothing but a benefit to you. Okay. And so I think we've got to be more creative and think differently about that younger cohort in the workforce, how do we engage them? How do we attract and retain them in different ways at different points in their career?
Wow. Well, so much info to hear, and we've got a lot of questions left in the chat, but we're going to have you back on another time, Cherie, to
Well,
get to them, because I think these conversations they're just amazing to sort of go down. But before we wrap up today, I might grab some final thoughts from everybody, because I think there was a lot of interesting notes going on there, so I'd love to hear what people are taking away. So I might start with you, Graham. Graham, did you have any final thoughts on today's conversation?
More time. We need more time.
yeah, we do. We could have a workshop or
Cherie,
a
this is
masterclass or something. Go deeper.
yeah. Look, if we wrap up by Monday, that'd sort of be okay. I think we had a couple of breaks in between. There is just so much to this, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's been a great conversation. Listening to you talk about the some of the known, and there's probably a lot of unknown sort of concerns, issues, preferences, wants, etc., of the different generations who are in the workplace at the moment. The fact that Jen said will continue to move into occupying a larger percentage of the workforce as we go along. And one of the things that I think definitely came out of the pandemic was a greater sense of agency for most employees. Suddenly we realised that we had a voice and we could actually use it, and employees would have to listen. But I wonder how you juggle that against the commercial viability of the business, because it's not a simple matter, and particularly the business is being run by where are we, Gen X or Boomers, who have a very different perspective, very different take. And yes, they might be sort of forward thinking and thinking about the fact that we've got younger people in the workforce and they think differently, and their needs and preferences, etc., are quite different. So we need to remodel the way we run our business. But we still need to be able to make a profit. Otherwise, at some point, it disappears. There's a lot to cover, but thank you. It's been a fantastic conversation. I'd love to. I'm just going to have to go and ask Bing, because I'm not using the other one anymore. I'm going to Bing. It is now a verb. I just used it. This idea of conscious unbossing.
It's a great topic. Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, look, I'll stop, but thank you. It's been fantastic.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Thanks, Graham. Yeah, no, great conversations today. And I thought we went down some really fun rabbit holes. So really interesting to get into some of the more details of some of these. Danette, did you have any final thoughts on today's conversation?
Yeah, totally loved the conversation. Really liked the question that Graham asked around, just being a bit contrarian, but then bringing out why it is so important. And what I really love in our next conversation, see, putting it in there now, is I'd love to hear about some of those workplaces that are doing it differently and really doing great from an engagement, because I suspect there's some workplaces that they're like, we got a 1% increase and now we're 23% engaged. And they have no idea what the possibilities could actually look like at 70, 80% engaged. So I'd really love to have a conversation on that to help people understand there are a whole stack of things they could do, but they're going to need to think differently around this. So fabulous, fabulous conversation as always, Cherie. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And thank you so much, Danette. Great questions today. And yeah, I mean, Cherie, obviously your three levers are really good, but I also there's a little nugget in there that I thought was kind of interesting, which was about how AI can't be responsible. You kind of mentioned it. It was a kind of little throwaway line, but that's a whole conversation in of itself that I think I'm sort of interested in as well, especially when it comes to sort of managing people and all this stuff. And yeah, anyway, there's so much we can get into, Cherie. Did you have any final thoughts for our listeners at all?
I do. And, even though Gen Z is saying these things, my interaction with these 200 leaders actually said they care about purpose and strategic direction as well. And they actually don't want to be micromanaged in a command and control environment. So there were some real synergies there. But my three parting insights are, if you're working in an organization, connect to their purpose. If there isn't a clear purpose, ask your leaders to help articulate that, because that can be a major game changer. The second thing is, as a leader or as a manager, the more you can do to be a coach, so play that coaching role rather than the managing role. So how might you show up and have those coaching conversations, give fast feedback in a constructive way, and make that part of the DNA of how you work? That will also start to create a rapid shift between that directional command and control, just do what I say type management. And then the third piece is change. Change isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And every organization has this massive list of changes, more change that they want to deliver than they kind of know how to manage. What's the story? What's the overarching narrative of change? How does everything connect up to the bigger picture? And how might you cluster it so that people can understand, why are we changing? What's the benefit that's going to happen to me? And how am I going to be supported through that change? If you can work on those three things, you can actually quite rapidly get a shift in the vibe and the real tone of the organization. So I would start there with those three things.
Excellent. Well, Cherie, I'm sure people have been listening to this and gone, you know what, I'd love to learn a bit more from Cherie, or I'd love to reach out. Where's the best places for people to do that and learn more about you?
Well, you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Cherie Mylordis in the world, so I'm easy to find. And my two organizations, so I run two businesses, NextGenify, so nextgenify.com is my consulting, coaching, speaking business. And then I have built a leadership academy, which makes future fit leadership more accessible to anyone, any ambitious professionals or leaders. And you can find out more about that by going to nextgenifyacademy.com.
Perfect. Well, they'll be in the description. So if you want to go check those out, just go click those links right now. Cherie, thank you so much for being an amazing guest and an amazing guest to open up this year. Danette, Graham, thank you so much for your questions and a great chat today. And to all our listeners that have been sharing the podcast and getting it out there, thank you so much. And as always, everybody, have a magical week.